The search kicks into high gear for survivors from the Sewon passenger ferry capsized off the southwestern coast near Jindo Island. Death toll remains at 25 while rescuers make underwater attempts to enter the craft. President Park Geun-hye visits the site of the ferry disaster and visits parents and family members of those on board at Jindo Gymnasium. The president is met with mixed reactions. Efforts to find any and all survivors are ongoing through strong winds. Poor underwater visibility and a change in current remain obstacles throughout efforts. 3 cranes arrive and are awaiting orders on Korea Today, Friday, April 18, 2014.
From Arirang News, this is Korea Today.
Good to have you with us on Korea Today on a Friday morning. Massive rescue efforts are underway off the southwestern coast of Korea in the 3rd day since a passenger ferry carrying 475 people sank. And according to the government, 169 boats as well as 29 helicopters and 500 civilian divers have been dispatched to the scene.
Despite the frantic search, though, no additional news of survivors, and the death toll as of now stands at a double-digit figure at 25, and time is running out fast. More bodies have been discovered overnight, and some of them have been identified through DNA testing. Let's go straight to our Hwang Sung-hee, who is joining us on the line at the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters in Seoul. Sung-hee, what can you tell us?
Minjung, 16 bodies were recovered overnight, raising the total confirmed death toll at 25. The identities of 10 more bodies have been confirmed through DNA testing, and 8 were high school students. Now that puts the death toll for students from Tanwon High School at 12, and 2 have been confirmed as teachers and 2 crew members. 9 bodies have yet to be identified. As for last night's additional recovery of the bodies, the Coast Guard discovered them in the open ocean and assumed they floated out of the ship as the tides shifted. Minjung?
And I believe that the authorities have held a briefing just recently on the results of their investigation. What do we know so far?
That's right. The prosecutors and police said investigation is ongoing to determine what led to the capsizing of the Sewon ferry. Now, what the question is whether the sinking was a man-made disaster. It's being speculated that an abrupt turn for a change in direction had caused the cargoes in the vessel to shift to one side, leading to its capsizing. Now, fingers are being pointed towards the captain, who is believed to have been away from the steering room at the time of the incident. The investigative team said that it conducted 2 rounds of investigations on the captain so far, but that they are having difficulty at grasping the truth due to differing testimony. Now, it was Arirang News Hwang Sung-hee reporting live from the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters.
And thank you, Sung-hee, for that. The desperate search for survivors continues this Friday, the 3rd day of rescue operations for passengers on the capsized ferry Sewon. A quick overview of the standing crisis. Overnight, the number of confirmed dead rose to 25. 271 people, a majority of them high school students, remain unaccounted for. 179 people were rescued on the first day of the disaster, but no new survivors have been found since. Now let's go over live to our Kwon So-ah, who is standing by at the Pengmok Harbor on Jindo Island, where search and rescue operations are continuing. So, can you fill us in with the current situation there?
The situation here is very, very tense as the Sewon ferry is sinking even deeper. Now, as of 1 hour ago, the tip, only around 1 meter of the ship was seen over water. Now, however, a little good piece of news is that the process of inserting oxygen into the ship has begun successfully around half an hour ago, and that raises at least a little bit of hope. Now, discussions meanwhile continue continue also on how the Sewon ferry is going to be pulled up. 3 cranes have earlier arrived at the Pengmok Harbor, and one is still yet to arrive. Now, the latest development is that in addition to the 4 cranes, Hyundai Samho Heavy Industries' own floating dock will also be included in the process. Now, experts say that this will be more effective, but families worry that pulling out the ship could kill possible survivors.
And I do understand that the families they are waiting for the families' consent in moving on with the crane activity. Now, speaking of the families, some of them are at the harbor trying to get a glimpse of the rescue operations. Now, how are they coping with the situation, Soa?
Right, some of the families are here at the scene, at the harbor, to watch with their own eyes what's happening here. And I heard families crying out for their missed beloved ones, saying, I will be waiting here for you until you come back. And some were saying, expressing also anger at times about the slow search and rescue operations.
Understandably so. The slow process has been blamed on the rough currents, which reportedly have been shifting and keeping divers from being able to enter the vessel. The weather conditions, they actually have, it's just in, they have entered the vessel, and the divers are in and operations are going. But the factor is that it is a very tough situation there. How are they right now?
Right, the weather conditions have been very harsh during the last 2 days. However, right now the rain has stopped. It is still a little hazy. However, conditions are improving, and the current temperature here is at around 13 degrees, and the underwater level is at 11 degrees.
All right, thank you very much, Soa. Now, efforts must still be made regardless of how desperate the situation appears to be, and the search and rescue teams are working tirelessly. And as you heard, they are making their way into the actual vessel, and working around the clock to find more survivors. Thanks again, Soa.
And we do have that major development that the divers have entered the vessel, so we'll keep an eye on that and how it unfolds. Now, as the hours turn into days, the families of the missing are trying their best not to lose hope and are praying at an indoor auditorium on Jindo Island for any news about their loved ones. Our Yudian is standing by at the gymnasium in the coastal city. Let's go to her right now. Lian, how are things looking over there?
Hi, Doug. Less than 2 hours ago, the head of the victims' families here issued a plea statement asking people across the nation to help them rescue their children. Now, they're extremely frustrated about the lack of details they're able to get here at the relief center. Not just that, but families here are furious that the number of rescue personnel announced by the government and the actual number that were put into operation when they visited the site did not match up. The government had announced around 555 personnel were put into rescue operation yesterday, while the number that the families here found was just around 200. There are Coast Guard officials here who are trying their best to answer any questions the families of these victims have, but it is an extremely tense atmosphere with many calling for a rigorous rescue operation. That's what you're hearing right now is from the background. They're asking for a more thorough rescue operation, and they're asking endlessly questions about the details about the operation as well. And they're just holding on to hope that their children are still alive.
They will be more hopeful now that the divers have entered the vessel. I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to be in their shoes, and they must be really traumatized. And I hear that they're receiving counseling as well.
Yeah, Jug, there is a special care center set up here at the gym where nurses and medical personnel are taking care of people and trying to help them. The past 2 nights have been extremely hard for these families of the victims. They have been under an overwhelming amount of stress. Some even fainted yesterday as they heard news about the rising death toll. This morning, I saw others laying down while getting IV injections. There are about 500 volunteers on site to help out at the relief center here, including those from civic groups like the Red Cross and various other welfare foundations. But that's all from me for now, but I'll be bringing more updates in about an hour.
And thank you, Leon, for that report. And with details of any new developments, we're joined by Kim Ji-yeon at the News Center, who has been following the ferry disaster for us for the last couple of days. There's allegations that the captain of the ship and some of his crew members have abandoned the ship, and this has likely contributed to a much higher death toll. Now, what should have been done by the captain and crew members? Ji-yeon?
Well, before I go into what should they do, I want to point out the new developments that the divers that were trying to get into the vessel have succeeded. They have failed according to Seoul-based YTN. And you have to know that this is a huge progress because they've been trying to do that for more than 20 times now. And without delay, I want to mention what should have been done by the captain and the crew members. Well, for starters, they should not have abandoned the ship without making sure the passengers were safely off the ferry. This is clearly laid out in a manual in the Sewon ferry, the steps to take for crew members in case of an emergency. In the manual, it states the captain and crew members should have made an announcement to the passengers explaining the situation about what was happening to the vessel and what they should do to escape to safety. And then the crew members should have stayed put to make sure that everyone on the boat was on life vessels. And then they should have checked the time the guard ship or rescue team was going to arrive. And finally, they should have stayed with the passengers and helped them get on board the guard ship. But as you can see, Young, not even one of these regulations were followed by the captain and the crew members of the Sewon ferry on that unfortunate day.
It's very hard to hear that a lot of this could have been prevented, but also it's good to hear that they have actually made their way into the ship. That's according to YTN reports. Now, there have been reports of text messages that were thought to be from survivors on the capsized ship, but those were found to be pranks, and now talks about some scamming texts are being sent to take advantage of this tragedy.
Well, Young, the government is warning about a text scam that falsely indicates that it is a message from Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, and it includes a link to a video of the rescue operations at the site where the ferry is located. And smartphone users who click on this link, a malicious app is installed that will leak the personal information embedded in the device. It then induces the users to install a fake banking app that will then extract financial information of the users. The government is trying to prevent further spread of this text and plans to distribute a vaccine to the users. Young?
Now, it's appalling how at times like these, times of distress, there are some people who would take advantage of others. It's horrible. Thank you, Ji-yeon, for that report.
Now, 179 passengers were rescued on the day of the accident. They may have saved their lives, but many of them have to be treated physically and psychologically as well. Let's now go live to our Connie Kim, who is joining us from the Korea University's Ansan Hospital, where the largest number of patients are being treated. Connie, now before we get to the survivors,
I'm standing in front of the...
Right, I do want to talk about the dead bodies that have been brought into the hospital. It must have been an emotional scene. Tell us more about what the atmosphere must have been like.
I'm standing in front of the funeral hall of Korea University Ansan Hospital. 2 additional deceased passengers have arrived here in this hospital just within 2 hours. And I must say the atmosphere here is absolutely devastating, with cries of relatives crying out for their deceased ones. A total of 5 lost ones are here in the hospital, and names of deceased are shouted out here and there. And with endless stream of sobbing, friends and families paying their respects at the hospital, Tanwon High School is reviewing whether to set up an incense altar within the school.
Many of us are just repeating this question over and over again. What could have possibly caused the massive ferry to tilt and sink? We don't have an exact answer to this as of now, but government authorities and experts are looking into all possibilities. Let's take a look at this report for more on the possible scenarios that could have caused this Sewon ferry disaster that killed 25 people and left 271 missing.
On Wednesday, the Sewon ferry, after large bang sound, began tilting over.
I went into the engine room at 8:40 a.m. After a few minutes, I heard a loud banging noise. Then the ship started sinking. I think I was at the engine room for 10 minutes before escaping after receiving a phone call.
Speculation for one of the reasons behind the sinking is that it hit a rock off the coast. But other reasons were also suggested after initial photos of the ferry were revealed.
The waves were gentle and we were sailing normally. Then the ship started rattling and then sinking.
At the time, the weather was not foggy enough to impair visibility and cause the ship to run into a rock. It was just a little overcast. So what caused the ferry to go under? Another suggested cause is that the sunken ferry may have not taken the route advised by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries.
We found out that the ferry was going a little differently from the advised route, but it can't be seen as going off course.
But what's suggested as the most likely cause of this point is that the ship may have changed direction too rapidly.
There was a sudden change of direction as we were looking at the route the ferry was taking, and eventually slowed down, so we are looking into that as a possible cause.
If the ferry was sailing at a high speed and it made a sudden turn at a big angle, the centrifugal force would have pulled it outwards. Cargo containers and vehicles inside the ferry may have swerved to one side, causing the ferry to capsize.
The real cause behind the accident has yet to be revealed, and these questions will remain unanswered until the wreckage is salvaged.
So 3 major possibilities have emerged, and it seems at this point that the ship's abrupt change of direction is the most possible cause as announced by the Korea Coast Guard. But nothing is clear yet. Now, for an expert's view on the possible causes, we have Professor Baek Jung-gi on the phone. He's a professor of ship and offshore structural mechanics at Busan National University. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning.
Now, let's go straight to this question. There are many scenarios being put forth regarding the cause of this tragic incident. What is your take on this, and could you walk us through what possibly could have happened to the ship?
Yes. Actually, the sinking of the vessel was taking place by the capsizing. That is what we have already seen and found out. There must be some multiple possible scenarios. Actually, it is important to realize that there are multiple possible scenarios, not single scenario, and we can make the ranking of these possible scenarios. However, actually, the most probable scenario is not necessarily equal to the case that the vessel was involved. However, I think that the capsizing must be due to by 2 possible scenarios. One is unintended accidental flooding. The other one is insufficient stability. Insufficient stability can be caused by several reasons. For example, design errors that may be due to some change of structures and some mishandling of the ballast water management. In this case, the capsizing can be taking place when the sudden change of course or path. And in terms of the unintended accidental flooding, this can happen by some structural damage, including some large holes. Some large holes can be caused by several reasons. For example, grounding, collision, explosion, or corrosion. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I think that the most probable scenario of this vessel accident is due to capsizing by accidental flooding, unintended accidental flooding by structural damage with holes, which was made by some grounding.
So you're going with the holes that caused the accidental flooding. Now, some say that the Sewon ferry built in 1994 was old and went through excessive remodeling at least 2 times after purchase. And they say this could be one of the reasons behind the disaster. What do you think?
Yes, I think that I understand that the vessel is some 20 years old. Then actually 2 years ago, the Chunghaejin company has purchased this vessel. However, I don't think that the aging is not very big issue, because basically ferry or the cruise vessels are relatively well inspected and maintained. Then what we are now talking is actually corrosion damage. Usually painting or coating is well made to prevent the corrosion damage. So I don't think the aging itself is not necessarily big issue for this accident. But I'm concerned with some change of structures. Mm-hmm. Because of this, actually the location of the center of gravity can be changed to be I would say upwing position. Therefore, we have to do do something to resolve this issue. For example, this kind of the structural change may cause the decrease of instability. Mm-hmm. So, in that case, it is quite vulnerable for the capsizing.
Right. And I believe there are various types of maritime accidents resulting from grounding. In this case of the Sewon ferry, what category would it fall under?
Usually the scenarios, 2 cases are relevant, namely the grounding with forwarding speed. In this case, the bottom damage will be taking place from the bottom of the bow structure to the stern. So we can see very long raking damage on the bottom of ships. This is the first case. And second one is so-called stranding. This is usually due to some engine which has been out of control, out of order. So in this case, the vessel can be located on rock. So the bottom structural damage can take place.
So the damage under the bottom of the ship was what caused the grounding in this case. Now, thank you, Professor, for your insight today. We do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of confusion surrounding this story, and adding to the chaos were unconfirmed reports of messages suspected to be sent by passengers trapped on the ferry through their smartphones and social network service. Police have since confirmed that these messages are not real.
Now, these types of pranks are hardly appropriate at a time like these. People want to believe that there are indications of survivors in the capsized ferry, no matter how grim the situation may look. Now, there may have been cases in the past of people surviving under similar conditions for 60 hours or so. So what are the chances of survival in this case? We'll take a closer look in this report.
In January 2012, the Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia, carrying some 4,200 passengers, capsized after hitting rocks off the Tuscan coast. Passengers were rescued from the cruise ship 36 hours after the accident. Also last year, crew members were saved 3 days after a ship crashed in the Atlantic Ocean. Experts say it was the air pockets that saved passengers when the 2 ferries capsized. Usually in an area that spans 2 meters in width, length, and height, oxygen makes up for 17% of the space, which is enough time for one person to survive up to 72 hours. That's why many experts point out that injecting air into the ferry will be of great assistance for passengers who need more oxygen inside.
It's good for passengers to get some air supply. Even if there is space for an air pocket in the ferry, if a person keeps breathing, the oxygen eventually runs out. There is 22% of oxygen in the atmosphere. If that goes down to 7%, then people will start suffocating. So the last resort is for us to supply oxygen into the ferry.
Now entering the third day since the ferry sunk off the southern coast, the possibility still remains that those unaccounted for may still be alive. But there's also the concern of hypothermia due to water temperatures.
It felt really cold at first, but I soon forgot about it in my effort to get to the boat quickly.
The water temperatures around Jindo Island are around 12.6 degrees Celsius. If this drops below zero, it can lead to hypothermia within 15 minutes and eventually to death in about 2 hours. But if the surviving passengers are huddled together wearing life jackets, it can extend the time window for survival.
In terms of danger, the most dangerous time would probably be immediately upon impact of cold water because people are very disoriented, they're gasping for air, they have a higher chance of drowning. Once they've survived that stage, if they're able to huddle and maintain body temperature, they should definitely be keeping their clothes on as much as they can, and conserving heat is of the essence.
Air pockets and potential survivors keeping themselves warm by coming together. It's a fight against time to find those who might be fighting to the very end.
And for more on the chances of survival, we're going to get an expert's insight. We're joined live on the line this morning by Des Ward, Director at Australian Marine Consultants.
Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the cause of the accident. Korea's Coast Guard is leaning towards the sharp U-turn that the ship tried to make. And I'm sure you've seen the sunken ship from various angles through media reports. Is there anything you can tell us about the angle or about the way that the ship went down or what, on the cause of this sinking of the ship?
I don't think that the specific angle of the ship itself actually gives too many clues as to the cause. I have seen, obviously, the two major causes that are being considered. The first being that the ship may have hit the seabed or a rock, and the other one being that there may have been a loss of stability due to a dramatic change in the angle of heel of the vessel. For example, if the captain has made a very dramatic alteration of course. I do think that those two causes are the most likely. Mm-hmm. I initially thought that the most likely cause was hitting a rock or hitting the seabed. I'm not sure that that is still, in my view, the most likely. I do think that it is unlikely that the ship has hit a container or some other object that was floating, which I have seen speculated on. I think that's probably a lot less likely. The ship has obviously suffered some major damage, and it's capsized. Now that has resulted from a loss of stability, probably due to accidental flooding. I've also seen speculation about how the ship may have been altered during its life. I can't really comment on that. We can only see what the investigation brings out in that way. But it's clear there has been some very dramatic and traumatic incident has occurred to the ship to result in such a dramatic thing that we're seeing now.
Des, is it possible for a ship to actually capsize due to a sharp U-turn, no matter how sharp this turn may be? Is this common?
And we're talking about a 6,800-ton ship.
That's right.
Yes, of course, and the answer is that it should not be possible. However, there have been incidents in earlier years where ships have had a dramatic alteration of course, which is not in itself sufficient to allow the ship to lose stability. But what has happened in other incidents, and may have happened in this incident, is that when you have a dramatic alteration of course, as somebody else I saw commented earlier this morning, you can have vehicles, for example, vehicles and cargo can break loose. I understand this ship had a substantial or a large vehicle and cargo deck. Mm-hmm. And if your cargo and your vehicles come loose and they all move to one side of a ship or the other, then that itself can cause a loss of stability.
Well, these initial reports from survivors, they're saying that there seemed to have been a huge bang before the ferry actually began to capsize. So could that be the cargo that's shifting around or a result of grounding? What's your take on that?
Yes, it could have been. As I say, it's really too early to do anything other than speculate. But I think that it's unlikely that there was an explosion or something of that nature. I think the bang or the loud noises that people heard is more likely to be vehicles coming adrift or contact with the seabed.
Now, we've been reporting about these possible air pockets where some of the survivors may be found. Given the structure of this ferry, how great of a possibility is this? Do you think there are air pockets where survivors could be taking refuge in?
Look, in my experience, there certainly will be some air pockets, but the possibility of there being any survivors in those air pockets at this late stage, you know, I mean, as you know, we're now entering
the third day.
And it's now been a long time since the incident. The water is obviously cold, and in my view, it is only a very remote possibility that somebody could still be alive in trapped air. If anybody were there now, it would be and alive now, it would be quite extraordinary.
Could there be a possibility of there being air pockets without contact with the cold water? Like a room almost.
Yes, of course. It is possible, but without knowing the structure of the vessel, I understand that there were cabins and people were in cabins, and I'm certainly not saying that it is impossible, but in my view, I think it is a very remote possibility now.
Okay, well, we are keeping our fingers crossed for that possibility. Now, let's talk about rescue efforts. It's been a painstakingly long and slow process from the layman's point of view. Now, you'd wonder, why not just pry open the hull and get these people out using heavy equipment? Now, what are some of the viable options? Underwater submersibles, perhaps? Maybe the cranes that are coming?
Yes, it's in a situation like this, I think what's important to understand is that there is no book that tells you exactly what to do. This ship every ship is unique. This ship has never been in this condition before. The people who are responsible for the salvage and the operation have to establish an enormous amount of information and an enormous amount of data before they can start physically doing anything. The difficulty well, firstly, let me say, it does seem that there is now, and seems to have been quite early on in the piece, really, a very major response. Firstly, with commercial ships and fishing vessels, and then in what my experience has been quite a short period of time, where we've got rescue ships, helicopters, and a large number of divers moved to the scene. However, getting to the scene and getting to the ship is one thing, but when it comes to entering a ship in this condition, it simply can't be rushed. There is too much uncertainty, too many unknown factors about the condition of the ship and the situation, and the possibilities have to all be explored and considered before you can risk putting more lives in danger by sending people into an upturned ship. Nobody knows what's in there, and you can't just send people rushing blindly into an unknown environment like that.
Entering this ship has been the stumbling block, it seems like, and I believe your organization does salvage and casualty consulting as well. And from your past experience, I know that every ship is different, but gathering the information that we have so far, can you give us an estimate, a ballpark figure on just how long this recovery process might take?
I certainly would say that the ultimate recovery process, I mean, if you look at the Costa Concordia incident is over 2 years ago and it's still being recovered. I'm not suggesting that this is going to take that long, but it's going to be a matter of days or weeks before the matter starts to really develop. It's not going to be hours.
Thank you so much for your expertise this morning. That was Mr. Des Ward, a director at Australian Marine Consultants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Park Geun-hye paid a visit on Thursday to the search site and the nearby gymnasium in Jindo Island, where many families in despair are still hoping and waiting on news of their loved ones. Our Polly reports on the impromptu and at times a very tense meeting with the families as parents express anger at the government response.
President Park Geun-hye arrived at the site of the search and rescue operation off the coast of Jindo on Thursday afternoon. The visit comes a day after the Sewon ferry sank 20 kilometers off Pyeongpung Island. Upon her arrival at the nearby port, Korea's head of state inspected the area and was briefed on the ongoing rescue efforts carried out by the military and Coast Guard. She said she was very concerned that the rescue efforts were slow, even though so many personnel and equipment were being mobilized. Park told officials that every minute was critical and that the safety of the rescue workers was also a priority. Park later visited the indoor gymnasium where the families of those missing are gathered, taking questions and offering words of support.
가장 지금 힘들고 순간순간이 고통스럽고 애가 타고 미칠 것 같은 이분들한테 먼저 알려드려야 된다 이거죠. 모든 것을 자세하게 좀 알려드리시고 또 현장에서도 아주 모든 각오를 다 하고 그렇게 또 얘기를 했지만 또 원인 규명도 확실하게 할 거고 거기에 대해서 거기에 대해서 엄벌에 처할 겁니다 반드시.
Many angry family members shouted and screamed as Park spoke, demanding answers and venting their frustration over the lack of progress to save their loved ones. Some even attempted to rush the front of the informal debriefing. Others expressed doubt that the government was doing its best to handle the situation and complained of the lack of updates.
이분들에게 신뢰를 받을 수 있도록 앞으로 좀 하여튼 마지막 한 분까지 구조될 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다.
President Park promised the families that they would be immediately informed about any developments, as well as the next steps in the rescue operation, including the arrival of 3 industrial cranes on Friday, which will be used to try and lift the ship. She told the families that while bad weather conditions are hampering the search, they should not lose hope. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
It's almost difficult to do the news without tearing up. The country is united in prayers and hopes for the successful rescue of the missing who are on board the capsized ship, and accounts of heroism are resonating with many people.
These testimonies are of both passengers and crew members putting their own safety aside to assist others, some at the cost of their own lives.
And in a time of despair and uncertainty, these accounts are giving hope for some that somewhere inside the ferry, passengers are pulling together to survive.
할머니 배가 침몰해서 이렇게 넘어져가지고 죽을 것 같아. 나 이거 좀 못 붙잡고 이러고 있어. 죽을 것 같아. 아이고 어떡해. 어떡해.
With the entire country praying for a miracle, all eyes are on the site of the ferry accident, while accounts of those who put themselves at risk to save others are offering a small sense of comfort and hope. Crew member Park Ji-young, who was the first confirmed dead, gave up her life jacket to students and helped every passenger from the 3rd floor escape before the rough waters claimed her life. Had she held on to her life jacket, the situation may have been different. 17-year-old Chung Cha-woong, a kendo 3rd dan holder, dreamt of pursuing his dreams for the sport in university. He took off his life jacket for a friend and jumped into the water to save another, but did not make it himself. Another student of the same age scrambled from room to room to hand out life jackets to fellow female students and stayed on the boat until the water was up to his chest, saving 20 passengers. 17-year-old Park Ho-jin managed to jump onto a lifeboat with a crying baby, saving all of their lives.
한국 병원으로 11명이 가는 거야? 그래.
It wasn't just the students. One of the survivors, Kim Sung-muk, is deeply saddened that he wasn't able to save more people on board.
With the help of others, I was able to get people on the second floor up on ropes and then onto the helicopters. Passengers in the hallway weren't able to get out because the ship was too tilted, so I connected a fire rope and helped them out, but the ship was at a 90-degree angle, so I couldn't help more. Water filled up too quickly, so people couldn't make it to their doors. I shouted out at them to break their windows, but I think they weren't able to, so I wasn't able to save them all.
Another passenger, Kim Hong-kyung, rescued some 20 passengers with a makeshift rescue rope using a fire hose and curtains, staying behind until the last minute. And the scene of several passengers coming together to save a young child touched the hearts of countless watching. Accounts of those heroic feats are spreading rapidly as time passes. And those still desperately waiting to meet their loved ones again are grasping on to such stories of hope.
And as rescue efforts continue through unfavorable conditions, the testimonies of what exactly happened in the course of the ferry's demise are heard through the surviving passengers.
The passengers who are safe and sound are the people who made it out of the ferry in the very first crucial moments after the ferry first began to capsize.
That's right. The hidden heroes were able to scramble to the location of the ferry to help shipwrecked survivors contributed greatly to the 179 passengers who were able to make it off the ship safe and sound, not to mention the civilian divers from across the country. Details in this report. At the site where a major ferry sunk this Wednesday morning, local fishermen raced against the clock, scrambling to the area and saving many precious lives. This is the communications center at the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives. An emergency alert was sent right after the accident, asking fishermen to provide full support in rescue operations.
It was a message alerting them of the time, location of the accident, and that young students are on board. We asked them to proactively take part in the rescue operation and lend all the support they can.
It's thanks to this message that many fishing vessels in the surrounding area arrived in time to save the lives of many passengers of the ill-fated cruise ship.
We were able to get in touch with 24 boats, and they headed to the site.
With this swift action, some 40 fishing vessels and roughly 100 residents came to the rescue and pulled out some 60 passengers from the ferry. Residents from the surrounding Jindo, Gwammaedo, Daemado Islands all arrived at the accident site to offer a much-needed helping hand. The Seomanghang port is where many private fishing vessels that took part in the rescue operations are docked at, and we met Captain Park Young-sup, who was one of the first ones to arrive at the site. He recalls a scene of devastation when he first arrived at the site of the incident.
When I got there, I saw the ship had already started going down. This boat can't get up close to the wreckage, so the rubber boats from the Coast Guard did the first-hand rescuing from the ship itself.
The captain pulled his boat up alongside Coast Guard vessels and helped rescue 27 passengers, bringing them to the Pangmokang port. And because of the fast currents, he says it was difficult to get even close to the area.
We tied the boat up to the patrol boat and took people into the cabin from the side.
The passengers rescued at the time were completely wet and shivering from the cold, as well as from the shock of the accident.
It was a mess. Everyone was frightened, cold, and we couldn't even talk to them.
Those rescued by Captain Park range from older tourists to young high school students. They sat almost in silence, but once they docked at the Pangmokang port, and put their feet on the ground, they cried out of relief.
They were younger students and older passengers. There was also a 6-year-old child. That child made it out alone, so we put the child on board.
Civilian divers from across the country are also playing a big role in the rescue operations. Roughly 500 divers, including Coast Guard forces, are coming together at the site and diving into the waters day and night.
The conditions with the waves are not very good, so we can only have about 10 centimeters visibility in the water. The speed of the current is at about 5 to 6, so it's extremely challenging in conducting our rescue operation.
But adverse weather conditions are not only hampering the rescue efforts, but they're also threatening the safety of the divers involved.
Today, we had a situation where 3 civilian divers went adrift during their rescue operation. Even with more manpower, the bad weather conditions with the current and visibility issues are making our operations very challenging.
These rescue workers are putting everything behind them to give people as much support as they need and hoping to bring everyone, the families and the entire nation, the hope and good news that they're desperately waiting for.
Good morning. Now let's run through the front pages of your newspapers. The tragedy that struck the nation is on all our papers this morning. And we'll begin with 중앙일보 today. Now this picture is of the rally that took place at Danon High School in Ansan last night, wishing for the safe return of the school students. The title of the picture reads, "We will wait for you, praying for a safe return in the rain." Now some 500 high school students, parents and residents of Ansan are holding up messages for the missing students. Here, as you can see, some of them include messages such as, "Please come back. You must be hungry, come home to eat with mom. I know you're cold, let me hold you tight. And I miss your smile." Now, candlelight prayer vigils were also held outside the school. And on 동아일보, here is the same image. We'll take a look at an article that's at the bottom of the front page. And the headline says, President Park says every minute and second is critical. Slow rescue operations is of concern. President Park Geun-hye yesterday paid a visit to the site of the sunken Sewon ferry. She also later visited an indoor gymnasium where the families of those missing were gathered to console the grieving members. And listening to their tearful complaints, she explained about rescue operations. Also aboard a Navy ship, she said she's very worried that rescue efforts are slow, even after mobilizing so many people and so much equipment. She emphasized that the weather is cold at sea, even colder underwater, and that if there are survivors, a second cannot be wasted. And moving on to 조선일보, they have 3 key headlines here regarding the tragedy. We'll begin with the first one here. The headline says, 4 months into the job, captain in his 20s steers the vessel. The main captain of the ferry at the time, his name is Lee Jun-seok. He was filling in for the original captain of Sewol ferry, who was on a leave for vacation. In fact, now another sub-captain, only in his 20s, was the actual one who was steering the boat at the time of the accident. And the second headline here says, a forced sharp turn through the fog. Now, based on the accounts provided by crew members, the investigators suspect that the Sewol sharply changed direction when only a gradual change was required, as you heard earlier, too. The ship lost balance. Its steering equipment is thought to have malfunctioned then. And the third headline right here says, crew members escape with captain's orders. Now, many of the crew members abandoned the sinking ferry without telling the passengers to evacuate. Now, the picture here onto the side shows the parents of some of the missing students, their hands grasped, praying for a miracle. And on Mail Business newspaper, we'll take a look at this image of some of the rescuers. The headline says, struggle with rescue operations due to deteriorating weather conditions, desperate battle against time. Now, frantic efforts continued yesterday to find and save the missing people, involving an army of rescue workers and ships, planes, and helicopters. However, they were hampered by low visibility and gushing wind and rain. The strong currents became tremendous obstacles to underwater searches. Nevertheless, the rescuers were doing their very best. In fact, 3 divers doing search work got lost for a little bit, raising fears that currents had swept them away. Fortunately, they were saved by a fishing boat taking part in the operation. And we'll lastly take a look at the Korea Economic Daily. We'll take a look at this headline. It says, "A miracle, please. Korea comes to a standstill in sorrow." And the subheadline, it mentions that many of the concerts and election campaigns that were held here in the country were canceled yesterday, with the entire nation being in a state of panic and grief. And that was a look at your newspaper headlines for this Friday. And coming up are the stock numbers from Thursday.
So the latest is that divers have entered the vessel. This is according to the Yonhap news agency that confirmed its report with the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters in Seoul. So hopefully more survivors will be rescued.
That's right. And also operations to pump air into the hull of the vessel is on way as we speak. And we will keep you updated throughout the day on Arirang News.
Do stay tuned for our 12 o'clock news bulletin coming your way with Mark Broom and Oh Jin-ju. Stay tuned.